How can a team with 4 World Cups to its name fail to qualify for 2 World Cup tournaments in a row? Winning the Euros in 2021 was possibly the worst thing that could have happened to Italian football.
And it's Italy who are the champions of Europe. Can't help but feel pleased for him. He deserves the big prizes like this. Italy are the champions of Europe.
That statement may sound crazy, but the celebration at Wembley masked a terrifying truth. It allowed the Italian Federation to ignore a system that was already broken. While the world saw a rebirth, the underlying problems, a dead-end talent pipeline, outdated tactics in SerieA, and crippling psychological trauma were left to fester. The victory wasn't a cure, it was a painkiller that delayed an inevitable collapse. Now the bill is due, and the price may be a 3rd consecutive World Cup absence. To understand how the Italian national team could fall to North Macedonia just a few months after lifting the 2021 Euros trophy, we have to look further back. The real damage wasn't done in 2022. It started in 2017, during a World Cup playoff against Sweden. For the first time in 60 years, Italy failed to qualify for the tournament.
For the first time in 60 years, Italy's football team have failed to qualify for the World Cup. 4-time winners drew 0-0 with Sweden in a qualifying playoff.
The public reaction was one of profound disbelief and shock, with Italian media declaring it the darkest day in Italian football history. This single event created a tension that never went away. It wasn't treated as a freak accident, but instead as the first visible crack in a rotting foundation, establishing a new baseline of cynicism among supporters that hadn't existed before. The immediate fallout was chaos. The Italian Football Federation, the FIGC, descended into turmoil, with leadership resignations and power vacuums. This created a visible sense of instability that filtered down through the entire national football program. The message was clear. This wasn't just a bad result, it was a systemic failure. Then, Roberto Mancini arrived and led the team to that improbable Euro 2020 title, seemingly washing away all of the problems.
On balance, for me, Italy were the best team in the tournament, and they lifted the trophy.
But that optimism was shattered in March 2022. The playoff semi-final against North Macedonia was supposed to be a routine step toward redemption. Instead, the loss wasn't just another failure, it was a devastating confirmation of the nation's deepest fears. The 2018 disaster was no longer a fluke, it was a pattern. The opponent's status amplified the pain, turning a sporting loss into what many saw as a moment of national humiliation. A defeat to a footballing giant like Brazil or Germany, that can be explained, but a 1-0 loss at home to North Macedonia felt inexplicable and shameful, compounding the original trauma. This is where the concept of a national trauma really took hold among former players and pundits. Every single qualification match from that point on, it's been viewed through a lens of potential disaster. Look at the recent 4-1 loss to Norway. Norway outsmarted them in every which way. This is the environment the current squad has inherited. The players entering the qualification cycle for 2026 aren't just playing to win matches, they're actively fighting against the ghosts of 2 previous failed campaigns, carrying a burden that their legendary predecessors never had to. The psychological scars from missing the 2018 and 2022 World Cups, they've inflicted a deep-seated fear of failure.
I thought we were going to the World Cup, so obviously we are set.
That now infects every training session, every team talk, and every 50-50 ball. This fear isn't just an abstract feeling inside the players' heads, it has a clear and devastating impact on how the team actually plays on the pitch. When you watch Italy play in a meaningful qualifier, you can almost hear the tension through the screen. Players who look fluid and creative for their clubs suddenly seem to hesitate, as if they're playing with a handbrake on. That's not a coaching instruction, it's a visible symptom of a team playing with an overwhelming fear of failure.
Talk to me about ridiculousness. This is the most generous World Cup qualifying process in the history of football. And Italy, the 4-time World Cup champion, Italy has the nerve to complain about it being too difficult?
In sports psychology, this is known as performance anxiety, a state where the pressure to avoid making a mistake becomes so intense that it leads to tentative, risk-averse, and predictable decisions on the field. You're no longer playing to win, you're playing not to lose, and there's a massive difference. The contrast is stark when you compare performances. Think about the Euro 2020 final shootout, where Italy's players looked almost unnaturally calm. Then, recall the World Cup qualifiers just months later, where Jorginho, the same player who coolly slotted his penalty against Spain, missed 2 crucial spot kicks against Switzerland that would have sent Italy directly to Qatar. The technique didn't vanish, the psychological pressure became unbearable. You can see this anxiety in specific on-field sequences during recent high-stakes games. A midfielder gets the ball in space, sees a winger making a darting run into the channel, but instead of attempting the difficult through ball, he turns and plays a simple 5-yard pass back to the defense. The safe choice is always the first choice. The body language on the pitch tells an even clearer story. Watch after a clean-cut chance is missed. You see slumped shoulders and heads in hands. When a pass is misplaced, there are frantic gestures and visible frustration between teammates, not as encouragement, but as blame. This isn't the look of a team working through a problem, it's the look of individuals cracking under immense pressure. The issue is made worse by a specific tactical reality in the Italian squad: the absence of a reliable, world-class goalscorer. Without a striker who can be counted on to convert half chances, the burden of perfection falls on everyone else. The midfielders feel they have to play the perfect pass, and the wingers feel they have to beat 3 players and score themselves. The desire to be flawless, ironically, just leads to more unforced errors. It all feeds into a vicious cycle. The fear of repeating past failures leads to cautious, ineffective play. Cautious play leads to dropped points and poor results. Those poor results then increase the pressure and reinforce the original fear, making the next must-win game even more daunting. This is why incredibly talented players, stars who dominate Serie A for their clubs, often seem to shrink when they put on the national team shirt. The trauma of the past manifests tactically as on-field hesitation, turning those qualifiers into psychological minefields where players are terrified to make a mistake. This on-field paralysis, it's then made even worse by something bigger than any single match: the crushing weight of Italy's own history. Every young Italian player who pulls on that famous blue shirt dreams of being the next Paolo Maldini, Fabio Cannavaro, or Roberto Baggio. That shirt is a symbol of Italy's immense footballing heritage, built on a foundation of 4 World Cups and a global reputation for tactical genius and impenetrable defensive steel. For generations, this history has been a source of national identity and immense pride. But for the current crop of players, that legacy is no longer just an inspiration. It's become a heavy burden. They are not just on the pitch trying to win a game of football. They are trying desperately not to be the generation that permanently tarnishes that legacy.
You're Italy, bro. It's not like if you were...
Unfortunately, Nick, I think it's a case of you were Italy.
Yeah.
They're not Italy anymore, are they?
Absolutely
Hannah,
right.
This is not a new thing. This is a continuous pattern.
The pressure is immense, and it's in this context that the Euro 2020 win had a devastating psychological effect. Mancini's victory briefly made the players feel like they belonged outside the legends. They had touched greatness and restored pride. This made the subsequent failure to qualify for the 2022 World Cup an even more crushing blow. It wasn't just a loss, it was a fall from a great height, reinforcing the idea that they were imposters who had got lucky once. This intense pressure to live up to the heroes of the past often stifles tactical innovation. A coach considering a bold new strategy, perhaps one that moves away from traditional defensive setups,
one thing's as clear as day now, just to get a little bit more technical and a little bit more micro on it. This team has to play with a 3-man center back system. I mean, that's clear as
knows that if it does fail, the backlash will be immense. He won't just be criticized for a bad result, he'll be accused of betraying the nation's footballing identity. It becomes easier and safer to stick with tried and tested formulas, even if they no longer work in the modern game. We see this pressure reflected in the media and from the fans. A modern Italian striker isn't simply judged on his own goal-scoring record. No, he's relentlessly compared to the likes of Christian Vieri or Pippo Inzaghi. A skilled playmaker, they're constantly held up against the impossible standard of Andrea Pirlo. These constant, unfavorable comparisons create an environment where players can never truly measure up. No matter how well they play for their clubs, this dynamic has created a strange paradox where the nation's greatest strength, its unmatched footballing history, has become a psychological weakness for the current squad. The history is the final piece of the puzzle. It explains how a team can look like world beaters one summer and a broken, fearful side just a few months later. The weight of Italy's glorious past, when combined with the trauma of recent failures.
The last two World Cups, losing against Sweden and North Macedonia. I think Italy has been getting progressively worse since 2006, really, when we had world-class players in every line, even on the bench. I was watching this video from 2002, and I could not believe what I saw. Del Piero on the bench, Gattuso on the bench, the lineup Maldini, Nesta, Cannavaro, Totti. Just the generational world-class players, goalkeeper, defense, midfield, attack. Every single one of those guys was not just a world-class player, but a player that doesn't come along for 15 years.
Becomes a paralyzing burden rather than a source of motivation. It leaves players terrified of making the mistake that will further tarnish a legendary history. So, with the team trapped between past failures and the weight of history, is there any way out of this psychological prison? Italy's path forward isn't about finding a new number 9 or a different formation. It requires a psychological reset, one that frees the players to perform without the ghosts of Norway, Sweden, and North Macedonia on their shoulders. They need to play for the shirt, not in fear of it. The challenge for Gennaro Gattuso and this generation is therefore not just tactical, but fundamentally mental. It's also about rebuilding confidence from the ground up and creating a new identity that isn't crushed by history. Can they break this cycle of trauma before 2026? Let us know what you think is the most important step in the comments below.